Hey boys and girls, I know this is not ideal and many of you are not super excited about the remote at home, but we're going to make the best of it. My first class yesterday, Miss Caudle's homeroom, you did get to hear chapter 6 of Day of the Blizzard. However, when we figured out that we may not be able to be here at school today, I went ahead and started making packets, so my second two classes did not get to read chapter 6 with me. So the chapter 6 is kind of long, so I'm actually going to split this into two different videos so that I don't have to record for so long. So and I'm not really sure how I'm going to assess you on this book yet, boys and girls, because without you having the book at home with you, I don't think it's very fair for you to have to take a test on it without being able to refer back to it. So I'll have to be creative in thinking about how I'm going to take a grade for this. So we'll worry about that later. All right, so those of you who did not get a chance to hear chapter 6 yesterday in class, I'm going to read that to you now, and I'll just do part of it and then do the rest of it later. So let's think back to chapter 5. So in chapter 5, remember, Katie got to the pawn shop and it was locked initially, and then the Lemons did open the door and they helped her in many ways. So if you think back to all the ways they helped her, you're probably thinking that, they got her warm and they dried her clothes and they gave her some additional warm clothes. They fed her cabbage soup. So they got her all straight, and she made the decision to go back out and head home, which was not what they advised her to do. However, she felt like she needed to go home. So back out into the storm, she snuck out when Miss Lemon, remember, left the room. So in chapter 6, we're going to go ahead and get started. So just listen and try to visualize. Remember, all those details in the book help to paint a very nice mind picture while you're at home, so you'll have a chance to practice that, okay? So, all right, so she headed back out into the storm, and this is where we left off. It said it was even worse than before. It wasn't snow anymore, but tiny icicles, sharp particles that stung her forehead and her cheeks. The sidewalk and street had vanished under soft white mounds in which all car tracks and footmarks had long ago disappeared. Walking through it was like climbing mountains. After just a few steps, Katie's legs ached and she was gasping for air. So we can tell already by that first paragraph that the storm had grown much worse than before, right? Another few steps and she knew she couldn't keep walking that way. Her enemy, the wind, had hold of her again, stabbing through her with icy fingers and punching her in the face. It was almost 40 blocks to home. Miss Lemon was right. She'd never make it. Never. All right, so there's a couple of examples of personification in that paragraph. Remember, we talked about figurative language and how authors use it to make the writing more interesting and to help to, paint that mind picture a little bit clearer for you. So it mentioned that the wind was stabbing through her with icy fingers and punching her in the face. We know that wind doesn't stab, nor does wind punch. So those are two examples of the author giving the wind human-like qualities to make it a bit more interesting, so that you can paint that mind picture better and know just how bad that wind was. Okay? All right, let's continue. She tried going on anyway, but it seemed that each time she took one step forward, the storm pushed her back too. On either side of the street, the wind had whipped the snow into towering snowbanks 6-7 feet tall. Katie sheltered behind one, trying to catch her breath. The snow gave way under her weight like a soft feather bed. It would be nice, Katie thought, to let go, to sink into that downy softness, to close her eyes and rest. Now, we know that is not a good decision, okay? If she did that, she may very well not wake up, right? For a moment, she did close her eyes, and then someone shook her hard. A man and a woman were pulling her out of the snowbank. "You foolish child," the man shouted. "You'll freeze this way. What are you doing out alone in this storm? Don't you know you'll die if you go to sleep in the snow? You must always keep moving." "I just wanted to rest a minute," Katie mumbled. Her heart pounded with fright. People sometimes did freeze to death. She had read about it in books, but those things happened out west on prairies or in the wilderness far north. They didn't happen in New York City right in the middle of 3rd Avenue. "Keep moving," the man told her. Keep walking until you get home. Don't rest anymore. It's too dangerous out here." "Well, how far are you going?" the woman asked. "Is your home near? Do you know that horse cars and trains have stopped running?" But Katy couldn't answer. "We can't just leave her here, Bill," the woman said. "She'll fall again and freeze. Let's take her home with us till the worst of the storm is over." Katy didn't protest. She felt numb inside and out. It didn't matter now. Nothing mattered. She couldn't get home on her own. All she knew was that she couldn't bear to be alone anymore. And who else would help her? She'd never even make it back to the pawn shop. She was alone in a part of a town where she didn't know anyone. She remembered the railroad depot. That wasn't very far away, but Papa wasn't at the depot. He too was somewhere out there in the storm, in a stalled train, or in a faraway town. He didn't even know that Katy wasn't safely home with Mama, that she was wandering around alone. What would Papa tell her to do? Katy wondered. He would tell her to find shelter. Katy was sure. She let the woman take her by the hand and lead her on. Even with help, each mound of snow seemed harder to climb. Katy lost all sense of direction. Were they still walking uptown? How many blocks? Maybe somewhere there were still horse cars running after all. Meanwhile, she just forced her legs to move on step after step after step. They turned a corner. Katy could hardly see her eyes burn from the cold. The snow was thick and hung like a screen between her and her new friends. Katy was glad for the comforting touch of the woman's hand on her own. It took forever to walk the length of the block. The three of them clung together, pulling each other along. Once they barely dodged some falling shingles. Another time, a piece of chimney crashed down just behind their backs. Halfway down the block, a tangle of telephone wires barred their way. Barred or blocked, right? Farther along the sidewalk, they had to skirt the broken branches of a fallen tree. At times, they moved forward on hands and knees, finding their path by touch. Katy could hear the woman beside her panting with the effort. Her own breath escaped in labored puffs of steam. All right, so if we were in class, I would probably ask you at this point, what details in that paragraph support the fact that it's difficult to walk down the street in the snow. So, you would go back in the paragraph and find examples or sentences or statements in which prove that it was difficult. And so you would tell me, A, they barely dodged, fallen shingles. You would also mention that they were having to move on their hands and knees from time to time. They were having to feel their path by touch. They were panting, right? Labored puffs of steam. All those examples support the fact that it was difficult to move, right? Another corner, we're going to continue. "Look, we are almost home," the woman said. "I can see the sign of the Windsor Hotel. That's on 47th Street. Only 2 more blocks to our house." 2 more blocks. To Katy, it sounded like 20. She stared at the big bulk of the Windsor Hotel. Rows of large, brightly lit windows splashed squares of yellow light onto the snow. How dark it was on the street. Was it night already, or was the storm blotting out all the daylight? The Windsor Hotel. She knew that name. Where had she heard it before? Suddenly, Katy remembered. Aunt Maggie. Aunt Maggie worked at the Windsor Hotel. By some strange kind of magic, these kind people had led her straight to the one person who would be able to help her. Katy explained. Suddenly, she could talk again. "Are you sure?" the woman asked. "Can you get to the hotel door by yourself?" Katy was sure. Just knowing that Aunt Maggie was nearby filled her with a new strength. She hugged her 2 friends. Thank you so much." And then they were gone, swallowed up in the snowy haze. On her own, Katy fought her way to the door. She stood just inside the entrance, dripping snow from the marble floor. For a moment, the heat and bright lights were almost too much. Katy had to lean against one of the tall marble pillars to keep herself from falling. No one paid any attention to her. The big high lobby of the Windsor was almost as crowded as a busy railroad depot. Well-dressed people milled about, shoving each other in their haste to get to the desk clerk. Some argued with him, please, you must have a room for me," someone pleaded. "Just a bed somewhere or a cot to spend the night?" Katie felt timid and strange. What does timid mean? We've talked about that quite a few times. Timid means shy, right? All these fancy people. She had never seen so many fur wraps and muffs and fur-collared coats in one place. Maybe she had come in the wrong way. How would she ever find Aunt Maggie in this huge place? All right, so if we were in class, I'd ask you also, what details in that text support the fact that the hotel is a nice hotel with that expensive, right? So you would give me details that support that. We read that there were fur-collared coats and fur-collared muffs and marble pillars and marble floors and well-dressed people and high ceilings, right? All those details support the fact that the place is an expensive place to stay. All right, let's continue, and then we're going to stop the video for today. Katie knew she couldn't just stand there. Slowly she walked to the back of the lobby. A man in a splendid uniform stood by the elevator. He gave Katie an icy stare. What does that mean? He looked at her like, "What are you doing here? Why are you in this place? You don't belong here, right?" "Where do you think you're going?" he asked. Katie wanted to answer, but the words stuck in her throat. Suddenly, it was all too much. Mama, the storm, her long, long walk, her aching hands and feet. She fought her tears, but they welled up anyway, filling her eyes and spilling over. "Aunt Maggie," she managed to get out. "I'm looking for Maggie Murphy." All right, so we're going to stop right there, and then we'll do the second half of the chapter in a separate video so it does not get too long. I want you to think back before, all of the details that made this walk difficult for Katie, and let's make a prediction. What do we think is going to happen next? We know now that she's at the place where Maggie Murphy, her aunt, works. So I want you to spend some time thinking about what you think, how the story will end, how you think the story will end. And we'll do another video to finish it up. All right, have a good day, boys and girls. We miss you.